This is a Silver Linings Handbook podcast bonus episode with Áine Cain and Kevin Greenlee of the Murder Sheet podcast. Several years ago, Kevin and Áine began covering what has become known as the Delphi murders. In 2017, 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German decided to take a walk on a trail in the woods to an old abandoned railroad bridge that locals often crossed in Delphi, Indiana. As they made their way along the trail, they ran into friendly faces who remembered seeing them, and they took pictures on the bridge. When it was time to come home, Abby and Libby were nowhere to be found. A day later, they were found murdered across the creek that the bridge went over. Police soon discovered a video that Libby took of a man approaching them who said to them, quote, "Guys, down the hill." The video cut off soon after. For years, the case went unsolved until October 2022, when a local man named Richard Allen was arrested for the murders. Last month, 2 years later, Allen's trial began in Delphi. The case has been mired in controversy over law enforcement's handling of the investigation and the media, the role that true crime sleuths should play in active, ongoing investigations, and a leak investigation that led defense attorneys Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rossi to be kicked off the case before being reinstated. The case has become one of many that have sowed and cast doubt, at times quite unfairly, on the criminal justice system. In many ways, the media's role in true crime has spurned those doubts and has, even more tragically, re-victimized the families and other loved ones of Abby and Libby. It has also left the small Indiana town and surrounding Carroll County as another one of the many victims. I truly believe it doesn't have to be this way. Kevin and Áine have covered the Delphi case for years and joined me for this bonus in the middle of their ongoing trial coverage. Kevin and Áine have been open about the need for reform in the new media landscape, and we discuss that in this bonus, the town itself, and the remarkable grace of the family members of the victims. So, Kevin and Áine, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk, especially as you're driving between home and Delphi on a Sunday and what has to be a wild time. But, you know, well, first of all, I'm grateful for your coverage. It's been really nice to know that on a nightly basis, I could get reliable information about what was happening in the Delphi trial, and it's good to see that your listeners have really stepped up to help you out. It's been like a warm, beautiful thing to see, but it also means I'll get less messages from my listeners who are concerned about your well-being.
Yeah, I think we were heading toward an intervention at some point, but we're very fortunate and we feel very grateful. And for the listeners who've just reached out and said nice things, or who are actively helping us sort of get into court every day, and it's been really like heartening and just kind of very humbling too, because I'm a person, I don't really like asking for help, so I always feel kind of guilty about it. But people were very insistent that we let them help us, and I'm just like, it's
made all the difference in the world.
It's super nice.
Because right now we're in a situation where when court ends, there's already people lined up outside for the following day. So literally, if you don't have line sitters, there's no way you can do it every day.
Oh, so you mean before you all get out of court for the day, there are already lines building up? How many seats are available to the public?
Well, I don't know if we want to say that, or I mean, like, it's kind of hard to say. No, but what I mean is, like, I don't want to like get a wrong number, because it changes day to day, because it all depends on how many people the prosecutors and the defense bring in. So wow. They have designated seats, and then sometimes it opens up and it almost seems like we're getting way more than you'd think, and there's no one who misses out. And then there's other times where there's fewer than expected. So it's really hard to predict daily. I mean, that's what I would say. Do you have a sense, Kevin?
I don't.
That's wild. It's really, I mean, it's fascinating to me too, and I definitely understand why they wanted the trial to be in Delphi and Carroll County. You know, it's where the girls and their families are from. But it's always amazed me. I think back to my days reporting that when a big event like this happens in a small town, how sort of like not just the trial itself, but just how transformative it can be. And I was wondering if there's anything you guys could share about your experiences in Delphi and the community in general, and maybe the impact that uh, the 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 deaths of the girls and the subsequent events have had on them.
It's been, I feel like it's a collectively traumatized community in some ways where, not only have they had to deal with just the brutal murder of two kids who, a lot of them knew the families of these girls, a lot of them knew the girls themselves, or at least, they have kids. And so they're sort of imagining, what if that were my kids out there that day? But then you have, just basically the true crime, industrial complex churns up the town, gets a hold of this case and basically, foments people just around town getting accused, or this guy was on the trail that day, maybe it's him. And, it's just taking something that's a tragedy, turning into an online circus. And now all that's coming home to roost as the trial is going on in their town. I mean, we've talked to people with local businesses near the courthouse. Those are hurting because Delphi residents do not want to be around the courthouse while this is going on, because I think on some level it's offensive to them, and I can very much understand why. Like, we can all tell ourselves, well, we're just trying to get information and whatnot, and that may be fair, but from their perspective, this whole thing has just been turned into a clown show, and it's offensive because it's two kids. And
I don't recall if we mentioned this on the podcast or not, but if you walk around town and go past some of the local businesses, a lot of them have signs saying no media, which is just a sign of how badly burned they have been by the media in the past.
It's a town under siege.
Yeah. I get the idea that when events like this come, it can be a circus-like atmosphere, right? For these people, it's their lives, it's their community. And I imagine, like, in a case like this, the town itself, the community itself, can easily become a bit of a character. And I know you guys have talked about how that character of Delphi doesn't really reflect the reality. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Delphi it's a small city. It's technically a city in Carroll County. It's the county seat of Carroll County. And it's a small town. It looks like many other small towns in Indiana. It's a relatively safe place to be. It has its share of crime and issues like anywhere else, but generally speaking, it's quite safe. This is a very much an aberration in terms of the town's history, which I think is what drew so much attention.
Yet, for some reason, a number of people online who tried to foment these conspiracy theories tried to paint this town as being incredibly corrupt. I've seen people online call it the most corrupt place on earth, which is just nonsense, and it makes the whole town. It's very unfair to the town, and it's inaccurate, and it hurts innocent people.
Yeah, it's just ignorance. It's like, I think there's a certain level that I've come to find with true crime where people really like to pass around blame, especially if something goes unsolved for a while. So you blame the police, you blame the family of the victims, you blame witnesses, you blame maybe just the environment where it happened. So in this case, the town. And maybe in some cases, some of that is warranted, like it's often a case by case basis. But in this situation, there's nothing dark or evil about Delphi. It's just a place where a very bad thing happened back in 2017.
Yeah. You had a guest on recently. I cannot remember his name, but he was talking about small towns, that one of the real challenges was that, very big cities that are used to investigating high profile murders have the resources, but maybe desensitized to it a bit. But in communities like Delphi or Boulder, Colorado, where John Benet Ramsey was murdered, or Moscow, Idaho, where the 4 University of Idaho students were killed, small towns like that are just not prepared to investigate crimes like this. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense, right? But I wonder whether some of what happens is when we're on the outside looking into a community like this, the same problem we all have, which is, well, I wouldn't have reacted in that way, or the law enforcement in my town wouldn't have done it that way. Or, I wonder whether we just sort of, in the process of these things becoming entertainment, we flatten the people who are involved and we make them something a little less than human.
No, you're so right, Jason. That's so well said. And I think that was Scott Thomason we were talking with, the former ATF agent who, has a lot of experience with this. I'm going to tell you something, and this is a working thesis. I'm very much open to receiving more information on this through trial and then through further reporting. But, I think we all tell ourselves comfortable stories sometimes. I remember I had a religious studies professor in college who talked about, like, we have comfortable theories. These are theories that confirm our worldview and make us feel safe and good. And one comfortable theory I see a lot is like, small town police bumble up and mess everything up and blah, blah, blah. And, the federal folks will come in and fix the whole thing. And, when you look at Delphi, it's more of a complicated picture because there was a federal presence very early on into the investigation. There were state police in there, county officials, locals, everyone was on this. And what I'm seeing as we're hearing this all unfold through trial, and this also matches our previous reporting, is that there was a fatal mistake with this case in that an important tip got misfiled. And to me, if I look at that, I don't know that that's local law enforcement that's at fault there. I think there may be an issue with maybe too many people got involved in terms of too many agencies, and
Yep.
things kind of, and all it takes is one mistake like that, and it's a huge issue. And so when I'm looking at that, I'm like, I don't know if that's like a county thing versus an FBI thing. I think that might just be like human error. And unfortunately, maybe if that had happened to a dozen other tips, it wouldn't have mattered. But in this situation, it really did matter. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know how much, it's like, how do you undo that? How do the investigators like dig up a tip that they don't know about because it was misfiled at the very beginning and never followed up on? It's like, it's hard to blame any one person for that, but it also is frustrating because you're like, that was a very important misstep. And the thing that I go back to is everyone wanted to help find these girls. And then when they were found dead, everyone wanted to help find their killer. And I'm talking about the public, all these law enforcement agencies, all of these, different contiguous counties, people. And maybe there's something to be said that all of that is very well intentioned, but it can lead to things getting buried under the heap of data that forms when something like that happens.
Yeah, no, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that in my experience. And we all know when multiple groups of people, whether it's law enforcement or otherwise, have to work together who don't normally work together, you're more likely to have things fall through the cracks. I remember, you mentioned that idea of sort of like that myth of the federal government. And I was talking to an FBI agent recently, a former FBI agent, who said to me, we don't do murders, right? And I was like, thanks for the reminder. You guys actually don't do murders, right? They rarely are involved in it. And I think some of it is exactly what you're saying. But I think some of that, mistakes that are made, or, whatever it may be, mistakes that are made or perceptions that there are certain kinds of mistakes, are sort of leveraged against entire communities. We probably see the same thing right now in Canton, Massachusetts, with the Karen Reed trial, where essentially the community has become another victim. Not to minimize the deaths that occurred, but I had a victim's family member describe it to me. He was his sister was killed in the Colonial Parkway murders in Virginia. And he said it's like a pebble that drops in the middle of a pond. The thing that's most affected is the pebble, and that's the victim, but that there are these ripple effects. And, maybe we pay a little attention to the loved ones, but it's their other loved ones, their communities, all sorts of things long after the true crime fans are gone. The reverberations of that pebble still exist. And and he made a great point. His point was, why would you want to cause any more ripples than that water?
Because it's fun for some people to engage in antisocial behavior when they can get away with it. And then it's also, if some people will come in and basically make money off of catering to those people and giving them, the sort of true crime conspiracy slop that they want. It's like, and then of course, then everyone else in true crime, it feels like sometimes when they're witnessing that happen, you don't want to alienate someone and then not get a promo swap out of it, so nobody says anything. And that's something that's incredibly frustrating to see, because it's like, I think personally that as true crime creators, I know you and I, Jason and Kevin, have talked about this so many times, and I think we're all on the same page, but I don't feel like there's any much of a wider movement around this. I think when people are engaging in that sort of toxicity, they don't have a place in our community. That's not okay, because it does hurt real people. And, this free speech, obviously, I'm very much a proponent of free speech. I'm not saying, people shouldn't be allowed to say what they want, but I don't think that they should be like welcomed to places like CrimeCon and sort of, taken out on the town by other creators. And I think they should be sort of looked at as like,
and I think pariah. I think one thing worth noting is that this Delphi case is something we've worked on for years at this point. And so the people who are caught up in it they are real people to us. We've talked to them, we've got to know them, and we know how they are affected by some of this garbage and lies and such that are put out there about them falsely. And so because of this, it seems a lot more serious and real to us. It's not abstract. We know for a fact that the lies certain people put up out there are hurting real people. And I think some people who come into it later and haven't gotten the opportunity to get to know some of these people may not fully understand how much real people are being hurt by this.
You might be a little too generous, Kevin, because at the end of the day, like, we can all put ourselves in the shoes of another person and imagine what it's like to be accused of something, or to lose someone that we love. I mean, suffering is so unbelievably universal. And sometimes I think that if people would think about what other people were going through before they start typing, before they start speaking on their channel or whatever it is, just ask yourself, what will this feel like for the other person, or what is it like for them? And I understand what you mean. You've actually met these people, but I don't think anything about not meeting someone prevents you from being able to put yourself in the shoes of a fellow human, which sort of brings me to tying it back to the point Áine was making before. I think ultimately the problems related to, I think, a lot of the media related problems we see in true crime and we see in other spaces right now are ultimately going to be solved by the readers. They're going to be solved by the listeners, and they're going to be solved by the viewers. But the real problem is that the readers, the listeners, and viewers, it will take them a long time to figure out that they're being fed BS if other creators do not stand up and call it out. And I heard a sense of frustration in your voice as you were describing, I guess, some of the silence, and it's a frustration I share. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I feel very bitter about it on some level. It's like, I guess, I'm coming from a journalism background. There, as you know, there can be a lot of things that go wrong in journalism, very much so. And frankly, we've seen
me being one of them.
But we love you, Jason.
I know.
But it's like even stuff like just getting stuff wrong or having a bias. Like there's stuff that happens at every level in every industry, no matter what. So I'm not asking for perfection from true crime, but some of the stuff that we've seen in just new media has been just like outright libel, outright slander, outright just like harassment, people doxing each other, people calling for others to be harmed, people threatening each other. And it's like, it's so far removed from any sense of professionalism and it's also, and then you have the people who are maybe not engaging in that, but are basically feeding that part of the community, whatever lies or spin that they want to get. And it's like, but it doesn't really seem like there are any sort of professional consequences for the people doing that. And it is frustrating. I'm not like, sometimes I feel like, like, am I losing my mind here? Because like, it's like, we're seeing the same people kind of treat these things like they can come in and be the ringleader of the circus and make a lot of things worse, spread a lot of misinformation. And it's like, I get that no one is perfect, but there's mistakes that are honest mistakes. And then there's like getting stuff wrong to the point where you're just actively lying to your audience. And I just feel like there's a lot of apathy within true crime amongst the creators. And Jason, you're one person where I always, like, you always are standing up for what you believe is right. We try to do the same and emulate that. I know of a few others who do that, but generally there's way too much silence about this. And there's a certain point where like those people should not be allowed to feel comfortable doing what they're doing.
And, I think also the conspiracy theories, particularly the ones that can be harmful to, let's say, the victims' families or, even the law enforcement officers or even to the defendants, whoever, harmful conspiracy theories. If you had asked me, I don't know, a year ago, I would say that part of the reason why most creators are not criticizing the creators who are doing this is because they simply just don't know about it. They're not paying attention. I have come to a darker conclusion in the last 6 months that it is an intentional compromise that some people are making because of exactly what you're saying. And I'm not saying this is everyone. They don't want to necessarily alienate people. And it came to head for me this year in watching, actually related to the Delphi case, which I don't think I've talked to my listeners about this, but there was controversy about using the girls' names in a hashtag. And I reached out to certain creators that I perceived were very close to victims' family members who were supporting a creator who was misusing the girls' names. And the pushback that I got and then heard through the grapevine certainly suggested to me that these people who I perceived as close to the victims' families were well aware, and they were just trying to walk the tightrope in between. And so for me, I'm beginning to feel that it's going to be a small set of voices that are going to have to be loud, like yours, that are going to change the paradigm. I don't know if
I want to tell you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if you heard Brett and Alice last night from the prosecutors podcast talking about some of the conspiracy theories, particularly those related to Libby's sister, Kelsey. And I'll tell you what Brett said, even though I don't use this word. He said basically, all of you creators and people who believe some conspiracy theory about the families being involved, you don't need to be educated. You don't need more information. You're just assholes.
Yep.
And I think
Amen. And I'm going to, I told this to Kevin the other day, Jason. This is like a very stupid quote, but Kevin and I both really enjoy the sitcom Community, and they did a Law and Order episode spoof, and the opening was this, and it just made me feel like this is what true crime is sort of becoming. It's a Greendale Community College is made up of the goofballs that run around stirring up trouble and the eggheads that make a big deal out of it. And I'm like, we're definitely the eggheads that make a big deal out of it. But like these goofballs are actually stirring up trouble that is like actually actively hurting real people. And it's needless. And frankly, sometimes it just gets so ridiculous, like especially in Delphi, we've had a lot of criticisms to share about Judge Frances Gull and some of her public access decisions. And those are very, very sincere. And you can disagree or agree with us or whatnot. But then when other people are coming in and saying, oh, Judge Gull is sending mind waves to tell the prosecution what to do, and she's handcuffing the defense with all this, like, because she's the chief Odinist of Indiana, it's like, frankly, like the reasonable criticism actually gets lost in that. And then we like lose a valuable opportunity to have a conversation about public access because we're getting screamed down by people who are just treating this like it's like, I don't even know, like it's complete entertainment that's removed from reality.
Yeah. It's more like a wrestling match. And everyone in this case, the judge, the defendant's wife, the victim's family members, everyone, the law enforcement officers, everyone has been criticized in ways that I personally find cruel and unnecessary to tell the stories. And I think there may be truth to your point that when people turn other people's lives into entertainment, they feel like they have the license to do whatever they want with it, that you're not really a human. And I think, I mean, there has to be, I would imagine, some kind of reckoning that has to happen for things to get better. Can you see a way of that happening?
I'm not sure I do, because as you've said, even the creators out there who purport to be victims advocates and purport to care about such things, they're not speaking up. They're keeping quiet because they don't want to offend people who they may see as peers. Or to be honest, they don't want to alienate the people who listen to those shows because they're afraid their own audience will decrease. If there's any hope at all, I think it has to come from the audience. That maybe when they recognize that certain people are doing things unethically or using the names of the victims to try to raise money for the person who is charged with killing them. If the audience sees these sorts of things and stops giving them their clicks and downloads, that's the only thing I see that can make a difference.
Take away people's money and you're going to see change. Otherwise, no, there's not going to be any change. And I mean, as long as people are basically being compensated for their bad behavior, the bad behavior will continue. And by compensated, I don't even just mean money. I can think of a lot of, attention. Exactly. Attention is currency. And that is something that a lot of these people thrive off of. And if you basically leave them alone in the dark, then they slink away. But if you're on there fighting with them, or even if you're just criticizing them, that's still attention. It's still giving them what they want on some level.
I kind of, I think there's an element to this, particularly for anyone who's going to be on the front end of fixing this problem, where it's going to require an element of courage. There is a time and a place, as I like to tell my friends, that this is why I'm a terrible businessman. I remember saying to one of our very large clients once, I was complaining to them about how poorly my employees were being treated. And they were like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's the boss. And, they're the ones who's in charge of the contract. And I was like, I will live on a tent, in a tent under a highway before I let you guys do this. So I think there's got to be a moment where people are willing to sacrifice something, whether that's financial or it's attention or it's other listeners, to do the right thing. And it may not be popular and you may lose something for it. But what I'll tell you is I am sure you will sleep better at night if you have a conscience and you do those things. I was going to ask you guys just a little bit about the experience of covering the trial. We talked about, there are wild lines and all sorts of, I imagine, interesting people. What has it been like to cover the trial other than not getting much sleep?
Oh gosh, it's a great question. It's been, it's been
rough.
It's been rough. The emotional content, I guess, for lack of a better word, of the days is very disturbing and upsetting. And one day I actually got so overwhelmed, I basically just had to leave because I just couldn't. We were looking, it was crime scene photos. And so I was just like, and it's been even days where they're not necessarily that horrible. Um, it's just very sad. And you're sitting across from or behind the victims' family members who have just been put through hell. And it's very upsetting. On the lighter side, it can be nice to talk to some of the folks in line and get to know some of the people. And we've met some certainly very nice and interesting people. And so that's been a bright side to it. And we appreciate those conversations. I think everyone's trying to keep, at least most of the people there are trying to keep each other sane. But
and there are moments that really remind you of how good people can be, and they remind you something about the triumph of the human spirit, because the families of the victims, we can't even begin to imagine how difficult this must be for them. But they are noticing all these people standing in line, and they are taking it upon themselves to try to take care of them. Most evenings, one of the family members, the victims, will come by in the middle of the night and will give food to the people standing in line. And I'm sure they're well aware that some of the people they are giving food to are people who've caused them grief in the past, but they don't care. They just look at that and say, this is a line of people who are here because in some way they care about people we've lost and we want to help them.
Yeah, I can't imagine ever being that forgiving or kind, because I think if I were them, I would be furious. And
what grace.
They're just kind. Yeah, they're great. They're the embodiment of grace, honestly.
They're amazing people. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think there's something about loss. Like, they have probably experienced a loss that's hard to lose your children, your grandchildren, hard for people to imagine, fathom. But there's probably something about loss that puts things in perspective. You're not necessarily happy with what everyone's doing, but I bet you see humanity in a different way. And and listening to your coverage too, I've noticed moments of levity. The security personnel wearing orange shirts on Halloween and other moments like that. But I remember that from my reporting, that if you reported it enough on like a big case or a trial or something like this, it become this weird kind of family. Not everybody in the family is loved. You've got the crazy uncles over here, and inevitably someone is off the rocker. But there can be this sort of camaraderie that can come from it. I think another thing in thinking about covering a trial like this, I think, people have a hard time understanding the exhaustion. It's constantly on, constantly thinking. You constantly have to, you're constantly reporting, but you're also checking your own reporting and verifying things. What's your daily process like, and how do you stay on top of it?
It's a good question. And honestly, I mean, one problem with some of the media coverage, and this is really not any individual reporter's fault. It's kind of just a systemic issue that's affecting a lot of outlets that I think have done good coverage. It's just, it's just the nature of the beast. That they're not as familiar with the case. See, like the people who are like the online people, they're very, very familiar with every aspect of the case, but they sometimes have a hard time communicating the big picture. Whereas the traditional media gets the big picture, but then they get all the little details wrong. So because they don't know who's who or what the relevance of this is. And so we've seen some pieces that come out that are just totally like riddled with errors, but it's like you understand how that happens because they're not able to necessarily, they're basically running out to go on camera or to file a story, and they're not really checking, and they don't really know how to check. So what we do is we kind of just rely on, like, hopefully one of us will get it right, and then we'll kind of compare notes a bit.
And frequently after court, we'll talk to other people who were there just to get their general impressions to see,
We've met some very nice folks who are other covering it for their channels and stuff. And so sometimes, we'll all be gathered up like, oh, wait, did you get Holman saying that? Or did he say that? Or was Baldwin asking this question first? And so there's sometimes an opportunity to make sure that, you have it right. The way
or even, is this guy? I'll never forget when I was at the Times and I would go into a small town to cover a story. I had this boss who told me, first thing you need to do is you need to go find the local reporters who have been covering this case, because they are going to save you from every one of your horrible mistakes.
Yeah, that's so exactly right.
He was so right.
That's exactly right. And and that's a situation where Kevin and I don't, if I sense a big quote coming, or a really kind of like, wow, quote coming, I'll try to get that verbatim. Otherwise, I'm just trying to sort of synthesize the content, and I'm not necessarily, so I kind of like, because also you can't hear, and, it's the acoustics are terrible. So if I'm even a little bit unsure of what was said, I just kind of either put a question mark next to it, or I don't put the quotes around it because I don't want to miss.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Quote anybody.
I wanted to ask you guys one more thing. I wanted to ask you, having gone through this experience of covering the pre-trial since the arrest, covering the trial itself, I'm sure you've learned a lot about true crime, about media coverage, about, your audience, about all sorts of different things, the victims' families. If you could take any sort of lesson out of this to make this world or this space or the broader world a little bit better, if I gave you somehow the magic wand I want to create, what is it you would change?
Áine?
YouTube delendum est. That's so. Cato the Elder would always stand up at Senate meetings and say, "Carthage must be destroyed." And so I'm not saying, we've actually met some really wonderful YouTubers, like just awesome people, and we're gonna probably shout them out at some time on our show. But like they came into this cold, and they've done just such a fantastic job. There are people on YouTube who are wonderful, and there's a couple of YouTubers that we know who do great work. So I'm not really talking about the website so much as what I feel is the sort of underbelly of the website, where you have
the culture that's sort of been created around true crime creation there.
Yes, it's really bad. It's really toxic. And I don't think the same thing exists on stuff that are more on the podcast side. And I think that largely has to do with it. You're not getting as many recommendations. Like, it's not like if I click on something that's like some sort of extremist viewpoint on YouTube, then suddenly my whole algorithm is pushing me further down this like radicalization, right? And so I think that happens to a certain extent with true crime on YouTube. So I guess it would be nice if the people at Google would understand that and probably, take some time to emphasize the responsible and good creators and de-emphasize all the garbage. But they're not going to do that because that's they don't want to get into editorial stuff. So I mean, that's an impossible dream. But I guess I would really encourage people, if someone's going out there and putting out all this stuff and like, very sensationalized coverage, I think that's a time to really be skeptical, even no matter what their background.
And Áine, one interesting thing about what you were saying there, I was thinking, yeah, that would be a tough sell to YouTube. But Facebook used to say the exact same thing until the 2016 election. And not that Facebook is perfect, but it's changed tremendously because of the consequences of that. So I'd hold out a little bit of hope. Hopefully,
No.
okay.
No hope. It's a bad.
How about this? I'll tell you the same thing I tell all my friends who refuse to hold out hope. I'll hold it for you, and it'll be here. And when you need it, I'll give it back.
That's so nice. Thank you, Jason. But Kevin, did you have anything that you're hopeful about that could make a good change in the world?
I would love it, and I think this goes back to something I said earlier. I would love it if people were just able to remember that all the people in these true crime cases that you read about or hear about, they are real, living and breathing human beings who have undergone one of the worst tragedies in their life, and they deserve passion and grace, and maybe keep that in mind before you start accusing them or spreading rumors about them. They deserve your sympathy.
Yeah, and if someone's out there attacking a victim's family, that's probably now listen, and Jason, you know this, and Kevin and I know this, but in some cases, a family member might be the perpetrator, right? Like we know, like, but I'm talking about just in something that's an unsolved mystery, just going out and hammering family members or hammering them at trial or whatever. That's a bad sign. Like that's not. That should be a red flag.
I love the comic strip Peanuts. I think almost everything in life could have a perfect Peanut strip to encapsulate it. And at one point, Snoopy was writing a theology book, which he called, "Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong?" And keep that in mind before you start spreading rumors or theories implicating family members in some of these cases.
But here's the problem, Jason. You have cultivated a very smart, I think, compassionate audience, because that's what you're putting out into the world. So us telling them that, they're probably not doing that anyway. Like I'm not concerned about the Silver Linings Handbook folks going out and accusing people. It's like, how do you reach the people who are stuck in this echo chamber where it's just nastiness and meanness and sort of conspiracy theory? And it sometimes feels like it can be very hard to reach them and sort of pull them out of that. And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe a smarter person than I could figure that out. But I think, with our audience too, I'm very proud of our audience. I feel like they're smart people who are engaged and are compassionate, and like maybe they can disagree on things, but they can talk about that like adults. And I feel like the wider true crime space is not always like that. And I don't know how to fix that beyond there being a wider coalition of creators who are essentially getting together and saying, this is not okay. And something should be done about it. But I don't have the, and I hate sounding so bitter on this. Like it's just that this has been so eye-opening about like how bad it is. And I hate that I feel that this is just what true crime is going to look like for the time being for a while.
Well, I have a thought about maybe some first steps. I think I would hope that you guys will continue to tell these stories of the dark and the bright side of true crime and its impact on people long after the national news media, the news trucks, and the big papers have moved along, because I think it's one thing to tell these stories in the heat of the moment. But I think being able to tell them on a bigger level and advocate for these things on a bigger level is important. And I agree with you. My listeners, your listeners, are probably less likely to be a part of some of this bad behavior toward people like victims' families. But the thing I would say is, each one of my listeners knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And so if they're aware of this, and if we're bringing it into their consciousness, in that moment where their friend or someone who's an acquaintance says or spreads something cruel, they've got an opportunity to do their one tiny part. I might be preaching to the choir, but if I can energize the base to go out there and raise the issue with the people who are close with them, we can make a little bit of a difference. So I'd say keep on talking about it.
I love that. I think that's a really great idea. And it's like, it's a small thing, but it actually does, I think, make a difference, those human conversations and hearing it from someone you trust. And I don't like when I look back at my early true crime consumption phase, I was, I think, listening to it more uncritically, and I would, I might take a creator's opinion far too seriously without really examining all the underlying facts. Or, I might be like, oh, well, they made that guy sound guilty, so I bet that's true. And I certainly wouldn't be posting about it, right? But some people do, and I can understand why, because it's very easy to get sucked in by new media in particular. I mean, it's people talking in your ear, telling you these things. It feels like you can trust it.
They seem smart. They seem
right. And it's like, that's why I always tell people with us, they're like, oh, I listen to Murder Sheet for all this stuff. It's like, thank you so much, and we're honored by that. But you could also, balance it out with some local coverage. Like, look at the local newspaper, look at the local TV stations too. Maybe we get something wrong that they get right, or maybe we have an opinion, and it kind of just spreads it out a little bit more, so you're getting that kind of well-rounded media diet.
Yeah, and to the credit of listeners, not to beat up on listeners, because a credible creator looks like an absolutely uncredible creator in the beginning. They look exactly the same, but so it takes time to figure it out. It takes listening. It takes critical thinking. It takes what you're saying about checking it with multiple sources. There was one other question I totally forgot, and I've had this question several times, and I haven't asked you. But several of my listeners have asked me, and your listeners, are you guys going to take a vacation after this?
Vacation? What's this term? I don't recognize that word. Give me a Webster's dictionary.
Right. let me see.
What's this language you're talking?
English, professor.
This vacation thing is time that we take off for ourselves, where we relax and we explore and we don't work. Does that help?
We may try.
We've tried in the past. Hasn't really worked out.
Delphi does have a way of kind of, we feel obligated to kind of drop everything and do it. I will say we are working on a book about the case, so that may also hinder vacation plans.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll probably take a little breather at least, right, Kevin?
I hope so.
We'll take a breather. We'll take certainly a breather, maybe a vacation if we can spring it. But it's very nice people asking, and just like, we're okay. I know we sounded completely out of our minds the first couple of days, and I apologize. I think we scared all our loved ones and our audience, and you kind of got to see more of our sleep deprived personalities, but we're really doing okay, and we've gotten a lot of help from just a lot of lovely people, and that's attitude grateful.
Lots of lovely emails.
A lot of lovely emails, and so we're okay. Definitely keep the families of the victims in your thoughts, and just Delphi in general in your thoughts. But I think we're all right. People have been like, oh, you guys are doing a lot more banter lately. That's not a conscious choice. It's just we're kind of a little bit, even though we are getting a little bit more sleep, it's long days, and I think we're just a little bit goofy at the end of it. We're not trying to be silly. It's just like sometimes Kevin will say something and I will just start cracking up because that's the state we're in.
And I think after this trial is over, we may be too tired to do a trip.
That's what I was thinking. It might be maybe a staycation. A staycation where we're at home. That might be nice.
I'm Jason Blair, and this is a Silver Linings Handbook podcast bonus episode. We'll see you all again soon.
This is a story of the one. As a maintenance specialist for university housing, he knows college students can major in wear and tear. Plus, housing so many students doesn't leave a lot of room to house all the supplies he needs. That's where Grainger comes in. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast, dependable delivery, Grainger carries the quality products he needs so he doesn't have to. From a new door hinge to a whole new faucet. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.